Hi, Andrew. Thank you for agreeing to do this. So, Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so I'm Andrew. I'm autistic, but late diagnosed, or something like 4 years ago now. I also, for various different things I get involved with, I'm also co-chair of the Autism Partnership Board, and come into contact with a lot of issues about autism.
Thank you. So Andrew and I thought we would have a little bit of a discussion about autism and sensory awareness. We are very much on the other end of the spectrum from each other when it comes to how we react to sensory input. And I think, Andrew, you're going to guide us through some of the things that people need to think about when thinking about sensory input for autistic people.
Yeah, and I was, and the more I thought about it, the more I was just like going, oh no, this is actually a very complicated subject because it covers such a breadth of environments and activities and a breadth of complexity for each of the different people involved. So yeah, I agree. It's really good that we're having a discussion, but me being hyposensitive, which is undersensitive, you being hypersensitive, which is being oversensitive, but it's actually, even thinking about that, I was thinking, actually, there are little parts of me which are super sensitive, even though the majority is me, is undersensitive. Yeah, oh, I don't know where the best place to start. Where would you like to start? Would you?
No, I don't mind, Andrew. I mean, we can talk about work and go through our days like that, or yeah, or even before that, getting up and the process of getting up and yeah.
Yeah, in fact, okay. Let's even start with sleep environment. So right at the beginning, when being asleep, or what helps me get to sleep in the first place. So, as an interesting thing about uh, almost like being undersensitive on that. There's a part which is not really about undersensitive about feeling things, but actually one of the issues I have is no internal imagery. So it means that when I'm in bed, the only thing I don't get, the only thing I can't count sheep or anything like that. Those things that people say, "Oh, help get to sleep." I've just got a voice that runs, and I start worrying about things. So for me, as an interesting thing, is I actually like to have a little bit of noise going on, like a little bit of uh, um, a, an interesting radio program I could fall asleep to, or something else, and that will help me. I also quite like. I'm actually quite happy if there's light on. Uh, and I sleep really good when I'm in a 24-hour light environment. And I'm guessing that you are slightly opposite to that.
So, yeah, no, I mean, very much in terms of light, I'm very different. It has to be completely dark, and I mean completely dark. I have a problem in the summer when we go into that sort of not quite full darkness. I will wake up at very many different hours. I do like having sound on. I've had sound on all my life, so I'm used to that. And I do like having sound on and but
Because
yeah.
I'm guessing with the, oh, that's interesting. So I'm guessing that because one of the things about the sound things is that also, for me, although it stops me thinking, but also it does cover up if you've got the right sort of sound, it covers up any extraneous little clanking noises that occur in the environment and such like, which would take attention.
It's a sound I can control, Andrew,
Yeah.
whereas particularly living in a block of flats, there's a lot of other noise that is outside that I can't control, that can be too loud or too soft or unexpected. and I can't sleep in that environment, so I need to have my radio on my phone, with a generally an audio story that I know, so I can predict it, and then I will drift off to sleep. Yeah, my biggest problem with sleep is the hours of light and the melatonin take up, which is, I know, a problem for a lot of autistic people. That yeah, sleep is not one of the most easiest things for. So that sensory environment is incredibly important. And I what I do call nesting, in that I have a duvet underneath me and above me, a pillow, a long pillow, so a bolster pillow, across the back of my bed. So I'm basically crammed in. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Um,
And that yeah. That's do you have a, so one of the sorry, that one of the things that brings to mind as an unsensitive person, actually one of the things I have and sometimes use when I'm, particularly also when I'm a bit anxious or such like, or not fit, I have a weighted blanket, a 15-kilo weighted blanket, which
yeah,
I double up so that it's actually it's like the whole of the weight is on top of me.
yeah, I don't have a weighted blanket because I need to have my feet free. But yes, that swaddling feeling, that pressure, that does bring some sleep comfort.
Fine for the light aspect. So I'll just describe my I'm fortunate, by the way, on sounds, because I live in a detached house with very little noise around it, in the countryside. So actually what I get woken up to is bird noises, which is really great, because but I don't have any curtains or anything like that. I love the light streaming in. Do you then, especially for summer, do you have as much blackout as you can?
Yeah, my curtains are almost permanently shut in the summer. I can't. I and even during the daytime, that's the case. Going on to the daytime is that is my house is my flat is generally underlit, which I doesn't have a isn't great for my visual impairment, but I can't stand any sort of electric light or even the light coming in through the windows. I will, yes. I live in a very shaded house, if I can manage it. Whereas
And
I
can I
could
just
see
check with the electric lights, because of course one of the things that, so on the some of the older lights, when and we'll get to work later on, but I mean, like I mean, obviously fluorescent lights have a buzz attached to them, which is like, that's the worst thing. Well, even to me, as I don't like the buzz from a
even,
light.
yeah, I'm I went to school in the 80s, so you were even earlier, only slightly earlier. Those are old electric buzzy fluorescent strip tube lights. I still have fears of them, to be honest, Andrew. And
I just
as
wondered
somebody who,
with the other lighting, do you find, is it all, so I mean, it's what's interesting to me is I really like light, and in fact my partner, who is more sensitive than I am because she's also autistic, she'll like but she's not I mean, she likes blackout for the night type things, but during the daytime I would like lights on as well as there being daylight streaming in, because it changes the perspective of it. But one of the things that I've actually been quite one of the things almost like that I do is I pay attention to the color sensitivity, the color temperature of the light, which is much easier with modern LED light. So I know for me that 5,500 Kelvin or thereabouts for is really the ideal color temperature for me. The older 2,500 tungsten ones are a little bit too yellow, but sometimes actually that's more relaxed. That actually is a good relaxing way of falling off of changing the light at night.
I quite like the warmer yellower lights, if because they're duller. So a bright white light, um, like this one, is not fantastic for me. So I know I will finish work in a couple of hours, having been in a office lit by white light, and be very, very tired. My eyes will be tired, my head will be tired because of the sensory input of the lights. Well, not just the lights, but that is one of the things that when I've been in an office on my own and been able to turn the lights off, I haven't been so tired.
Yeah.
Because the sensory input, the oversensory input, my brain is constantly trying to process makes me tired, to be honest, Andrew. It does.
And there's another interesting example of that oppositeness, because if I have the lights dim, then I'll stop falling asleep. It's like with your, could I just check with your, would you like to briefly describe what your visual impairments
So
are?
so I do have a visual impairment, which means that my corneas are not the right shape, which means that everything is blurred, and glasses won't help. But so yes, I have a lot of scarring on my corneas, and and the thing, a bright light probably would help make things clearer and less likely to bump into things or know where things are. But I have no, I don't want to control it that way because I can't take the input.
Yeah.
And that's a balance that maybe a lot of older autistic people or even younger children might have to balance of where they need the light or they need the noise or they need the touch, even if they don't like it, because of other requirements of co-occurring conditions.
Which then becomes a balancing. Oh, how do I get this right? And it means that I suspect that it's a bit like going, if you needed more light sometime, but you have to balance off that you'll be feeling, for you'd be feeling tired afterwards by having the extra light. Whereas at least for me, as my eyesight's getting worse as I'm getting older and wanting and I'll say, by the way, that my eyesight has been, although I've got what's known as an alternating squint or such like. It means I don't have stereoscopic vision, but I have super acute vision. So I have what's known as 30/20 vision, which means that what most people see at 20 meters, I'll be able to see that level at 30 meters. So I have better than 20/20 vision. But as I'm getting older, my ability to focus, do close focus, whereas before when I was very young, I could focus on the end of my nose. Now it's sort of like quite a lot difficulties is normal with as you're getting old. But I've only just started requiring reading glasses. But the extra light, it's just like going, it's really been helpful to me that I like the extra light, because now it's sort of like it just helps with the reading and all those sorts of things. But you mentioned about bumping into things, and I was just thinking, oh, that's an interesting thing about environment, because now, although in theory I've got very good vision, I can see see things, but I do, and I think it's partly to do with my undersensitivity in terms of the way things occur. Is I do bump into things, and so therefore, and I'll suddenly, and because I'm undersensitive with touch as well, I might not even know that I bumped into something, other than that I've suddenly discovered I've now got a bruise where I didn't have a bruise before, or 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 such like. And I also in terms of environment go, I now know that if I've got a chair that's in the wrong place and I bumped into it once, and I know I bumped into it, I know that if I don't move the chair, from experience now, that I'll bump into it again later on in the day, because as I'm walking through that bit of corridor within, or environment within the house, then automatically I track the same route and I bump into the same things. So for me, I'm very careful about making space for, like, going, oh yeah, that needs to be there, because otherwise. And also, an interesting extra thing for me is, because I'm almost like super robust, and I have I like very strong furniture, because I'm likely to break things without even realizing it. So everything is super robust, which for you, what's your how's it?
So I like, because I don't have a very good executive function either. So the idea of being able to know when I need to tidy up and when I need to clear up, I have to have a room that is, everything is in the same place. So I can't, and that helps with my vision. So I know where I'm going and where what I'm doing. So I don't tend to bump into things. Not as an autistic, that isn't. When I do know it. And I don't. My touch is generally around other people touching me. Especially if it's unexpected. I don't like hugs so much. I like hugs from the people I know, but not generally. And I think so I have a room that is, everything is where I need it to be and within easy reach generally. In terms of breaking things, I think it's my inquisitiveness. I'll often find something and go, how does that work, and want to take it apart. And that's but that's not a sensory thing, and that's just a autistic mind of, how does something work. So
I got that reminds me, this is a digression, but I got into trouble when I was in infant school, because the teacher had bought in a one of the old style telephones, and I thought, oh, this is fantastic. And within a few minutes, I completely disassembled it, which they were not particularly happy about. But to me, it was just like going, oh, this is interesting. Oh, I can unscrew this. Oh, I can have a look at what's inside here.
I used to do it a lot more as a teenager, but there are times I look at my radio and go, I could take that apart because I want to know, like you said. And I do think that is an autistic, inquisitive mind yeah. But we're going off on a tangent there, Andrew. But
amusing things.
It's an amusing autistic antidote, but the number of people that go, yeah. Totally.
You mentioned about environment, which was funny. So I mean, I'll say that for me, I really do like everything in its place. So that's the starting point. I like everything in its place. However, my executive function and my ability to do that is completely what I know, that when I've lived alone, it's just like going, so this morning the house was completely tidy. I am sure of that. I'm pretty sure, although I don't have a very good visual memory. I'm sure it was. but somehow the house is now in a bomb site and there's only me in the house. How does that happen? Because unfortunately, because I've sort of like got, yeah, there's some level of there's a strange thing that goes on. And if I'm almost like in a good place, I can actually the house doesn't actually tend to get that way quite so much, and also I've got the ability to restore it. And but what I do is I actually have, for my own benefits, to keep myself sane because of that, is I actually have a check when I'm running well. I have a checklist which enables me to reset the house as it was. Then it enables me to find things. But what's really interesting is my storeroom for exactly that thing about I I have everything. I really useful boxes. I've got hundreds of them. They're all they're all neatly labeled on shelves with the things in place, so that I can find things, because my ability to spot where things are is just like terrible. And I know that actually, if I've just had something and it's gone missing, the most likely thing is to, if I've just put something else down very recently, then the best thing to do is look underneath that thing, because that's where I've probably hidden the thing.
And in terms of things being in its place, I have to uh say my keys, for instance, and my phone, I have to put straight in their place as I walk through the door, because otherwise, when I come to pick them up later, I will not know where they are. If that makes sense, because so my keys just get dropped on my radiator next to my front door, and that's where they stay. And I actually do have a key hook just above that said radiator, but the process never goes. It needs to go on the key hook. So when my mum comes and puts it on the key hook, I feel like I've lost my keys. It's
Yeah.
like, no, that's not the proper place for it.
I wish I was. Although I've got a. I mean, I actually I've found that my key hooks now have actually gone a little bit different. So I've now so you for if you're doing workshop type work things, you can get these little magnetic trays where you can put things on. So I've got those magnetic trays that stuck to the side of the refrigerator, and they're great for just sticking the keys on the magnetic trays. So that's my key hooks. But I wish I could. I try to be in the habit of using the things to put in. But if I'm rushed, and it's like this thing about the house turns into a bomb site, I'm so focused on what I'm doing at that time that I might rush in, be focused on what I'm aiming to do, and I've somehow put the key down on a random table or a random shelf, and it can be even the top of shelves. So I can't even see them, and I don't know why I do it or how I do it. But I've just suddenly, and it's like going, but and then I go, where have I put my key down? And I have to spend, and it's one of the most difficult things I do every day. Is almost like spend 20 minutes trying to find something which I had only very recently, and it's like, well,
Even yesterday, Andrew, I must have walked in on Sunday and not dropped my key on my radiator and took it to my kitchen. And yesterday, I walked into my kitchen and my keys were on my kitchen side, and I was like, "What are they doing there?" And then I forgot they were there because something else had taken my focus. I and then when I came to go out, I was like, "Where are my keys?" And it's that executive function and that focused memory of where, like you say, looking for 20 minutes of something you actually know where they are, or have no memory of putting them there.
which is one of the reasons why I love a clear environment, because I'm much more like to be able to spot something which is where it's out of place. But I just wish I could keep it in that sort of state. Most people wouldn't think. Most people who have known me for a long time Actually, my house is in a much better state than it has been for a long time. But most people would know that somehow I'm my environment is chaotic, even though I don't want it to be like that.
I don't want my environment to be chaotic. It becomes it very quickly within seconds of me being in it. Um,
With your work environment, because you're at work at the moment, how do you find what makes a difference? What's best for you?
I so at work at the moment, again, my desk is the most chaotic desk in the world, which makes no sense. But yeah, I like it when there's nobody else in the office because I turn the lights off, and I mean, then I don't look if there are other people in other parts of the building and I can hear them, I find that very difficult. And I apologize if there is noise going on because I realise that I'm in a room that's got the back to the road, so there's been a few trucks go past and somebody's hoovering outside. So even when you're in a work environment, um, um, it's uh, it's difficult to manage other people's uh environment influences over those places, Andrew. Um, yeah. So I tend to mask a lot, and like I say, then get very tired at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing. And I'll say, by the way, I mean, I'm at home, and we talked about sensitivities and I liking light, but actually, the curtains are closed because otherwise I know it'll blow the screen out and everything. And I've got it a slightly different environment, but actually, because I know I'm focusing, by the way, I'm less. It's almost as though that brightness goes away. But the moment I'm like relaxing, I like going, I want it bright again. But it's like going, but it's an interesting thing. But at work, one of that an interesting issue. So the place I used to work used to have individual offices. In fact, for quite a while, I had my own office, which was really great. But um, uh, they then went open plan, where you've got 100 people on a or 200 people in a large open space, on all layers of management and such, like, all in a big open space. And it's an interesting thing is that there wasn't any thought to, actually, for some people that's not so good. I as an undersensitive person, it wasn't. I'm gonna say it wasn't an issue for me because it was light and it was airy. The noises were just. It's almost like the noises. The fact that there was a lot of bits of noise from people, it disappeared down into the environment. Whereas for some, that's a much more tricky thing.
And we've moved from a place where we did have individual offices to an open plan office. Not quite that number. So it is difficult at times. Again, I tend to just mask and that energy absorbs it in my masking. But there are smaller rooms that if I do need to go to, I can. And I think that's a fairly easy, reasonable adjustment that people can make. Yeah.
Well, it can be if the workers thought ahead to make enough of those small rooms available. Whereas actually the place I was in there was a big fight for meeting rooms because there just wasn't enough meeting rooms, and it made it complicated. So let alone individual rooms. But one of the things that actually in another place in a place where I was based for a period, which was open plan, one of the things that they had done was the desks that they had reasonable backs to them, which were soft. And what that did was soak up some of the noise of the environment, whereas the the other place actually wasn't soft backed, and it meant that the environment was a much noisier place because the noise wasn't reduced.
And echoey, and therefore, yes, no, more much, yeah, it did, yes. And I think that would, I'm very lucky actually. I just the other day, we were emailed about the light, and I think people are aware of light and sensory issues at my job. So that's yeah, I'm very lucky in terms of that. Andrew,
Briefly just touching on work. One of the things I was thinking about, because I was discussing with someone very recently, because they've been having a very good, and this is they're almost like their work passport that they've been developing with their employer, who seems to be taking it seriously about their they've got a diagnosis of both autism and ADHD, but one of the things that they've got is they've been working through about a tailored adjustments plan for work. And for me, that's one of the things that is it's almost like a very helpful thing if you can persuade an employer to go through with you and to act on it, is in fact all of the different things that would be reasonable adjustments that would make working life more straightforward, which would take on board sensory things as well as things which would affect executive function and times of working and numbers, and how communications is and all those sorts of things. And it's just a thing that springs to mind, and I'm actually really for that will be developing that more widely would be a good thing.
Yeah, no, and I think that's maybe we need to have another conversation about reasonable adjustments at some point.
Oh, and yeah, other areas to discuss are, because we've touched on a bit on home environment, we've touched on some work environment. I mean, yeah, our school's quite a long way away from me. I'm just thinking of different environments, and of course that's a different.
An interesting environment for me is hobbies.
Yeah.
In that, I like going to sci-fi conventions, which are incredibly brightly lit, incredibly noisy, and lots of people, obviously. And it's interesting how, for me, although I am aware of the sensitivity, and I am aware, and don't get me wrong, it's not like I can turn my sensitivity off. That if it is something that is my hyper interest, that it doesn't quite affect me as much until much, much, much later.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in fact, I'll mention in a moment about sci-fi conventions, but yeah, I mean that's actually one of the things that I remember from the reading of some of the OT occupational therapist things. In fact, one of the guidance is in fact sometimes where you've got things that are more difficult, actually involving things which have got a real interest, but actually touch on some of those issues are very like where you've got touch issues, not liking certain kinds of things, but actually if it involves some play therapy things or play activities or stuff, but it actually still involves things which you're not so keen on touching, it's almost like takes the mind off those things. I've just as a side, I indeed have been to a couple of sci-fi and fantasy long weekends, and also to it was a steampunk festival thing, which was quite a fun thing to go to. But of course, for me, the sensitivities things don't play into that at all anyway, and I just like going, oh yeah. But however, the social side, I do like meeting people, but I do find it's almost as though I get to a point whereby there's one thing about some of the conventions which is interesting, is I like meeting people, but I get very tired by meeting people. But on the other side is that those conventions, or in fact anywhere where there's crowded things, it's okay for me because it's almost as though I can move around invisibly within where there's a lot of people. Whereas if you've got a medium amount of people, that's more difficult, or very a one-to-one is great for me. So if a small number of people who I know reasonably well is fine. A very large number of people around you, like in a crowded city, is fine for me because I can, because of my sensitivities don't, just it disappears. It's almost like disappears people, and then I'm invisible, and it's so the conventions for me actually an interesting thing as well, because you've also got lots of different things going on, and you're like going, oh, what's next on the schedule, or what different things could I go to?
Yeah, and so I go for a specific program, and I tend to hang out with the actors from that program. That so that's in fact I'm doing it next weekend. So it it it, it is for me it's that, but it's interesting. I remember what you were talking about, the play element there. Is I've discovered I don't like dew on my hands as an older person. If I've got soap or glue or anything on my hands, but I used to love messy play. So
Yeah.
it's but I like the manipulation, and that was also for somebody, so somebody who doesn't have very particular good grip on fine motor skills. I think it was very useful for me to have for that sort of play. Yeah, even though I possibly didn't like that sensation at the time, but because I was so engrossed in that play,
And I
it
think,
took away.
but what's interesting is, and because I do think of that sometimes, is in fact that that it's not necessarily the case that what it you might have enjoyed it then, but now you don't actually like the feel of some stuff. It's not that over a period of years that things are always going to be the same. Things actually do change, and it's being aware of it. But another a key thing that also sprang to mind about fine motor skills and all sorts of things and interests. So I would say that that some of these things are also about aptitudes, and one can be stressed by doing something that one's not very good at, or put an awful lot of effort in, and it takes a while to get there. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not going to get there. It's sort of like going, because if I'm interested in it, then I will get there, and it might take me longer I mean, I always think of that I'm not very sensitive on balance and touch and such like. But with various of my hobbies that I've done over the years, and I tend to focus on something for a while and then I move on to a different interest. So my current big one is climbing, and you have to have very good balance and very good positional motor skills and those sorts of things, which I would say that is not something that I've been particularly good at, but certain of the things like table tennis, which I've enjoyed, I've almost like developed some of those sorts of things because I've done it so much and enjoyed it, and it's sort of like it's helped focus and develop some of the things, and I can certainly feel that climbing has helped me almost like feel about balance in a way that I haven't before, and now I'm feeling much more able to do it. Or with archery, what's interesting is that I'm generally undersensitive, but I did get to a point where I was doing it so successfully I could feel the way that the bow was resting on my hand, and during the course of the shot I was getting to the position whereby I could tell whether the shot was going to be good or not, because I could feel how the bow had moved down my hand as I was doing it. And to start with, the idea that would be the case would be like going, but I can't even feel things properly. But I was getting to the point, it's like going, but it's an interesting thing is that the development by doing something, and I was doing archery for 3-4 hours a day for over a couple of years or so.
An amount of time, Andrew.
A significant amount of time. But I mean, I got very good.
And I guess this is something else maybe that people don't understand is that that ability to hyper focus on something for a length of time. You know, like my sci-fi addiction at the moment, and I say addiction because I think that's how a lot of people would describe my focus on it. But I focus on it for that amount of time, and people go, how many hours have you devoted to that? But to me, it's not about the time, it's about the enjoyment I get out of it, and that I can focus and develop skills through it, like you're saying about your archery and your climbing.
And so that and that's helped you overcome certain sensitivity issues that you've had. And for me, it's because actually for me, one of the things they do go in a bit hand in hand with some of the undersensitivities. You know, my ability to know what's going on in terms of how I'm feeling mentally or just doing stuff it's sort of like, and it's one of the things I mean, I can't, because I'm not, there's only one area that I'm particularly oversensitive, which I'll describe in a moment, but it's like going it means that as an undersensitive person, I've not really been aware of it's almost like going, if something happens and you can go, oh yeah, that's a bright light, and you're aware of it's a bright light and what it's, and you can go, oh, actually what I need to do is reduce the light. If I'm undersensitive, I'm not even aware that there's an issue until something happens which I recognize that it's an issue, which I just feel as though, oh, actually that's a bit unfortunate in one sense with the hyposensitivities.
Yeah, yes, and I think for somebody who's hyper, I will then avoid situations where I will immediately just go, no, that light's really bright and I don't want to go there, when actually it might not be a problem. Does that make sense? That you're not aware that there's a problem. I hype up the problem so much that sometimes the problem is non-existent, but I'm just so aware of how I react. I don't want to put myself in that position.
Yeah. And I guess that's an issue about also what strategies might be there for trying to, I mean, I'll say that even things that I enjoy doing a lot, like climbing at the moment, I'll have a great deal of anxiety about changing environments. I can't really pin down what it is. It's just that going stresses me, even though I know that once I'm there and started doing it, I shall enjoy a lot, an enormous amount. So even though I'm under sensitive things, and you go, oh yeah, but it's going and all those sorts of things shouldn't make any difference, but nevertheless my anxieties are built up from a number of different things, and I can imagine that's one of the things about how to remind oneself that actually it might be that it's okay when you're there. And I'll tell you a trick that I do for running, as an example, or for climbing. Sometimes I'll go, well, yeah, I'll stick to climbing for a moment. I'll go, I'm anxious about going, but I do like my food, and just around the corner from the climbing wall is a really nice cafe. So I'll go, right, just at least go to the cafe and have a coffee and maybe a bacon sandwich first, and then I'm just next door to the climbing wall. So then it makes it sort of like that step is so much easier. Or with running, what I do, like I go to the start of I say, look, you'll enjoy it when you've started. Go to the start of the run, which is only 200 or 300 meters from my house, but I've got to get in my running gear and such like, and say, and once you're there, if you really don't want to go running when you're there, fair enough. But actually, once I'm there, of course, I go, yeah, I'm here now. Great. And there's sort of like, so that's a couple of mini strategies that I've used for helping me get over. But for me, it's not necessarily about sensitivities. It's about, but for some, it might be.
Yeah, and that is very similar to a strategy I use in terms of going to the sci-fi cons. Is If a particular actor is there, I will go, I am going, I know that actor is there. He understands that I'm autistic. He will protect, he will make differences for me. And he does, by the way. We know each other and he does. And then that allows me to enjoy the rest of the con, even if I am starting, even if those sensory issues do start to surface, and it's that getting up, it's that small step of getting there and being there, that then once I'm there, I enjoy it. You know, much like you say, going on the run. You know, it's you're there, you might as well just go and have a coffee, or you know, you might as well go for recline once you've had your coffee, because you're there, aren't you? So you know,
Yeah, well, it's also it's helped with the transition because I've relaxed during the coffee, if you see what I mean, or relaxed, you know, and it's like going, it's part of that transitionary thing that I'm having difficulty with, or if I'm like going, actually, there's, you know, there may be times which is associated with it's going to be busy or such like, and I'm just like going, oh yeah, I've just worked my way through. Do you have any at home things? Do you have interests at home that are affected by how your senses?
I mean, I mean, so watching the sci-fi, I don't watch it on a big TV. I have it on my iPad, because then I can monitor the light output. So I turn the brightness, the screen brightness, right down, and the sound right down, and have subtitles on. Whereas normal people would watch it on a massive TV with the volume as loud as do you know what I mean?
But there's an interesting couple of things that you mentioned, though, is one, again, reducing the light levels to something you're watching, but also that's interesting about the subtitles and sound, because it's like going, you just putting subtitles on without the sound. That's an interesting one.
Well, I have the sound on, but I always watch TV programs with subtitles as well. I think that's a language processing thing, that I find it easier to understand, to process language with subtitles. And I think it is an autistic thing. I don't know, it's a sensory thing, but I almost maybe it is a sensory thing, because I'm having so many sound inputs that maybe I don't catch words, or I don't catch, and therefore having that secondary input that tells me what the speech is, I can process it a bit better. I don't know, Andrew. I have heard other autistic people say that they watch TV with their subtitles on.
So in general, I often don't, but sometimes I do. And there's a complexity of stuff. So it's an interesting thing for me. I actually, because of, and you can argue whether it's about sensitivities or sensations or such like, but I get actually, there are some parts of programs that cause me an internal levels of stress buildup of some sort, or anxiety buildup, and especially if there's some social things on there. But also generally, I like programs played. So I watch programs anywhere between, typically, if I'm on my own, the minimum speed I'll watch something is 1.5 times real time. And if the program will support it, up to 2.8 times real time. And what I find is that the subtitles are helpful, because sometimes the audio doesn't work quite so well, or people's accents are a bit strange. So what I mean by a bit strange is that sometimes, I'm fine with the general American accent, but there might be some particular person who there's here's an interesting sensory type thing on that, which is which might indicate what I mean by strange for me, is if I'm on the telephone, there are some people who they're absolutely clear on the telephone, and there are some, and I'll say my ex-wife was one. The the sounds, particular frequencies, just didn't work very well over the phone. So I couldn't tell. I was like really struggling to hear what she was saying, but actually that was on landlines. On mobile phones, it seemed that the actual the sound was a bit, was almost like the sound was a little bit wider, so you could actually, oh, you know, the frequency distribution was better, so I could actually hear what was going on. And I can imagine with the subtitles that if you've got any strange, you know, even if it's just somebody who's got a, yeah, it could be an accent that's different, but also just the frequencies could be different that you
I
don't
think
pick
it
up.
is. It's a pitch and a frequency thing and certainly transmitted through a loudspeaker or a speakerphone. It does get distorted, and therefore I need the subtitles to tell me what I've just missed. If that makes sense.
Well,
Yes,
I mean, it's well, but often multiple inputs help you to fill it. Help just generally can help fill the if you miss one in one sense. But that also springs to mind is there might be somebody who might benefit for, if you're using a small thing, is to actually using a separate higher quality US Bluetooth
yeah,
speaker or something like that.
a Bluetooth rather than a yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. I was just I'm just thinking other areas that might be so social. How does senses affect you in social environments?
It's almost a sixth or seventh sense, Andrew, that the proximity of people is a sense I don't like. Does that make sense? And
Yeah,
that is very wearing. And that goes back to the hug thing, you know, that I nest in my bed. I like that pressure, but I don't like people giving me that pressure. Um, in an open plan office, and I know that's work rather than socially, I find people overwhelming. Whether that's all the senses working together, I don't know. You know, the people have different smells, different sounds, different clothing, so their colouring of their clothing or whatever overloads me. But I find social, and I find the social cues very difficult as well. I hate small talk. So somebody asks me how they are, I am. I by rote go, I'm fine, thank you. But I don't ask them back whether they're okay, and I always walk away thinking I should have done that, but it's just not something that occurs to me.
yeah.
And yeah,
But early on, you just early on the beginning of that bit of the social bit, you mentioned about just almost like the seventh sense, or the extra sense of not feeling. Do you naturally stand a little bit further up? Do you naturally stand a bit further away?
yeah, yeah. Unless I know them, Andrew. I mean, like, so I'm going to this con next week. I will immediately go to this person straight away. But everybody else, I will back off and stand further away. I don't like that sense. And and I found in queues and things, and I used to do it when I was particularly little. I used to spin around with my arms out, going, if you are in this circle, you shouldn't be. Because I'd rather you were not in my physical space. Yeah.
And I think because I think that's interesting as well, though, because you were doing that probably automatically without particularly thinking about it, and it's almost like a it almost feels as though I'd be if I felt that as a normal case now, I'd be wanting to say to people, don't worry, it's not about you, it's just how I generally feel, and therefore it's sort of like I'm not, it's sort of like helping others at ease, not just about one's own self, but also it's just like saying, I prefer you to be, just like hinting at people, I prefer you to be a bit further. But what's interesting is what I suspect, and I don't know whether I did this as a youngster, because I mean I know that, and it partly could be to do with my own undersensitive, that my ability to know what the right space is, because obviously everybody has their space that they tend to like, you know, whether they are neurodiverse or not, you know, there's always a space that people like. But I know that I don't, whether it's down to my own sensitivities, but sometimes I've been closer to people than people would like. And I've also seen that amongst what I think, with some autistic people, there's almost like that, they'll go right up into the person's face, and it's just like going, and it's not, and it's just like, that, I mean, it's just interesting, and it's not that they were trying to cause any trouble. It's just like going, they were just right, literally nose against their face from their side.
No, I don't. No, I actually went to college with a young woman who, so I'm pretty much arms out if you're coming in, you know, with her, and she would stand, literally skin pressing, and when we'd say to her, please move away, she'd giggle as if she'd done nothing wrong. But because she didn't realize that was the sense that she was, that was that barrier, that yes, maybe she was undersensitive to touch or whatever, or personal difference, personal space. I don't know, but yes, no, I've seen people that yeah.
I suspect there's a number of other social things that come into play with sensitivities, including, you know, all the different sensors in terms of that, and of course one of the things, people might, I'll just to say for anybody who watches this recording, but my laptop screen is broken, so I'm actually looking to one side all the time on my where Sammy is over here, where my camera is over there. But one of the things that and again, it's an interesting thing about whereabouts it is, whether it's a sensitivity or whether it's about the way that brain processes. But often a very typical thing with autistic people is not being able to make eye contact. And I couldn't make eye contact. I realized when I was young, and I wasn't diagnosed autistic, but I realized when I was very young, maybe 11, maybe 12, that sort of age, that actually that people made eye contact. And I know that I couldn't do, because if I did, then my brain almost like froze. But what I did do is I learnt to go, oh, I'll look at someone's nose. I can look at their nose. I'm not looking at their eyes, I'm looking at their nose. And I was faking going backwards and forwards, but it was almost like a sensitivity to eye contact. And it was like, but is it what is it that's going on? But this sensation pathways are an interesting thing.
Yeah, and I've taught myself to make eye contact, but I'm also aware that sometimes when I'm just trying to make eye contact, my eyes are like really wide, and like I'm just trying to make eye contact. I'm forcing myself to do it, and or I'm staring at somebody, you know, rather than making eye contact, so they're uncomfortable, you know, like. But I'm just making, I think that's making eye contact. I don't realise until somebody goes, you're staring, and I'm like, not though, am I? You know, it's that. And then you have the problem of, if like you can act out that eye contact, a lot of people will go, oh, but you're not autistic because you can make eye contact. But you're not making eye contact, Andrew, you're looking at the nose.
Well, in fact, it's now become so automatic about looking at someone's nose, and also, but I don't I mean, one of the things I was also aware of is that actually, when are people looking backwards and forwards? Because obviously people don't, and it's like going. So I just try to do it randomly, and I know that some people, and it's like it isn't, it's part of that mask. It's part of one of the masking approaches. Well, you might call it that. Is I'm just trying to be regular on that, and it's like you say, is that people go, oh yeah, but that's but you act so normally, and it's like, oh no, not in that one.
Good. I'm glad I have socially assimilated all the social roles, but I actually, yeah, no, no. I'm actually a bubbling ball of anxiety and and over sensory overload underneath. Yes, no, I think maybe that's what people forget. Is that if you mask and assimilate all those social roles, you don't see what's going on for the autistic person, actually.
Yeah, I was just thinking of something that's just finally sprung to mind that maybe we could just dwell on this, that it and draw to a close on, is there's one area that we haven't yet touched on, is stimming, self-soothing, manipulating objects as a way of, and it's almost like, for me, there's a level of which there's a sensational stuff that's happening that helps soothe me and such, like, because it's taking it enables me to use those sensors and such like, and people have a wide variety of different things that they may do, and it's not necessarily they're aware of, and there are different reasons for doing it, but I certainly there are some repetitive behaviors that I do which are helpful to me.
And I think maybe it's that diversion of focus as well. So you will have, Andrew, you and I have been in many meetings together. You will see me stroke my hair, and that's because I like the sensory feedback I get from both my head and my hand of stroking my hair or playing with my hair, and that diverts my focus to that, but allows me to focus on the meeting as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um,
And can I say that from my perspective, it's very irritating, because some of us haven't got hair, and I'd like to get. I actually used to do that self-soothing thing. Now I haven't got any hair to do it with. It's just not. That's one of the issues for. It's like, oh.
Yeah. No, and you have said that to me before. You have said, Sammy, stop playing with your hair, because I haven't got it. But it's a self-soothe, it's a sensation being stroked, isn't it? Or so upstairs I have a piece of string that I play with constantly because I have something in my hands. It's that repetitive movement that allows me to self-regulate.
And actually, I was aware as I was doing this, but one of the things that I do, and because actually the just because I'm pressing quite hard when I'm doing this, and I get and I'm aware that, in fact, there's one on right on the side of my hand where essentially I've gouged my skin out, and I can actually I can quite often get covered in sore areas, because actually it's a thing that it's giving me some level of almost like divergent from my thinking, but it's like it's actually not necessarily very healthy. And I know some people, with again back to the hair thing, actually some people do it, so some autistic people do it so much they actually pull their hair out, yeah.
And actually, Andrew, going back to my vision, one of the things that I can't do or shouldn't do is rub my eyes, but I dig my knuckles into my eyes. I know I do, because I need that sensory feedback from around my eyes. It's really difficult to and that's why my corneas are scarred, is because I've literally put so much pressure on them. But at the time I'm doing it, it's comfort.
Yeah, and also I don't know how much awareness you had, but actually, I mean, for some of the things, when I know that when I'm so I can tell I don't have very much, like I say, one of my sensitivities, my internal feeling under sensitivities means I don't tend to feel when I'm stressed, other than the fact that what happens is that I know that ultimately the work, when I'm really stressed when I'm long-term stressed, that actually I take the skin off the top of my feet, and I can almost like tell from where the different sores are that have appeared, but I'm not even aware of it until it's just like going, oh my goodness, that's happened. And I think there's a level at which some of it is almost like okay, and it's fine, but there's a level where it can go too far, and it's important to pick it up. I mean, one of the things that I sometimes find for self, and I haven't done it for a little while, and now we're talking, I'm like going, oh, let's get them out again, is I've got a stack of poker chips that I saw someone on some YouTube thing shuffling them, and I went, oh, that's great. So I got some, and then that was a really soothing activity to learn how, or as in it was gave it a level of sensation that was good. And I know that people have like these things called fidget spinners and all sorts of different things which can be helpful. But of course, I mean, there's the more natural ones, and I say more natural, but people do get work. External people worry about them, is like the rocking,
Yeah.
which gives some feedback, but it's a completely healthy activity. It's just like some might go, oh, but that looks a bit odd, but it's completely normal.
It's a vestibular balance, isn't it? It balances and it balances people, but or the head banging, when particularly young children will look like they're in a mosh pit, but that is just a sensory seeking activity,
Yeah.
and there's a need for it.
It's sort of like that balance between when things are a good thing versus actually when it goes to, I mean, one of mine sometimes going too far is when I bang my head against a wall or such like, which is obviously damaging, but actually when I'm extremely stressed and having a meltdown, that's one of the things and now I try not to do that, or I try and pick something a bit softer if I'm going to do that. If I'm having a meltdown or such like, because of the level of awareness, like going, no, this is damaging me. But it's very, I hadn't realized that actually a lot of with your own eyes, that was some of that was self done, but
I do, and I'm sure you've seen me in meetings kind of pulling this sort of face and kind of going, but it's like the pressure I just put on my face just doing that. I know people will go, didn't you just hurt yourself? And it's painful, but a nice painful. Does that make sense? And I like that feedback.
And that is a very interesting thing about some of the self things, is that I can do something that will cause me pain, but if I catch something unexpected which causes even a lower level of pain, it's like going,
yeah.
It's like, so I've removed on the back of my car, which has got the top of it goes up smoothly because it's got some auto weighted things to do it. I've removed those because of the 2 or 3 times or more now I bashed my head against the thing because it didn't open fast enough, and I bashed my head and I went, so I've removed those so that it opens quick.
No, and yeah, it's funny, isn't it? People are more sensitive to pain, but then can cause pain to themselves. But it's a nice pain. I think that's the only way I can describe it. Sometimes is it's a nice pain. I don't know.
Well, maybe we ought to call it an end to the conversation, because we've touched a lot of different areas.
We've talked more than half an hour, Andrew, and I think we've talked for covered a lot of stuff. So I am very, very grateful to you. We'll probably edit this down in the long run, and maybe it will go on longer than Autism Week, because I think that's I think there's a lot of stuff we've covered. So thank you very, very, very much.